You're listening to the Valley Current.
Try again. If you don't first succeed, isn't that what science is all about? Try again.
You are the scientist because you corrected the problems.
Well, I think it's just resetting Zoom. I think it's glitchy and things happen that people don't predict, and we've become so reliant on it. I think there probably are more Zoom calls happening these days than there are regular phone calls. It's almost like the phone is irrelevant. Certainly the home handset phone is irrelevant, but I think the number I dialed, the 707 number for you, is your home handset number, isn't it?
Yes, and that's what I spoke to you with.
Right. And so in a way you could argue the home handset is the more reliable, but fundamentally it's also rarely used these days because people are using all sorts of other things, right? It's like Zoom and everything else is what people are doing.
Yes, well, as you know, I don't own a smartphone for reasons of privacy and security.
Yeah, I found that out because I tried to dial you on your 352 number, which was your historical phone number, and I was told that I have the wrong number. So somebody's got your former 352 cell phone number, because you did have a cell phone once upon a time, right? Didn't you?
I've had a cell phone for years, and it's been active for years. I don't know where you got that number from, but it's not accurate.
Okay, so this is a good segue into this article you sent me by a gentleman named Dr. Sam or Professor Sam Westreich, PhD. The title, The Hayflick Limit Tells Our Cells When to Die. Here's why that's a good thing. And the subtext is telomeres, the Hayflick limit, and how we may someday overcome the mortality of our cells. Pretty racy title from 4 days ago. And I noticed that you left a comment that said, hey, there are enormous number of errors of omission and commission in this article that describes my work, L. Hayflick, but he didn't respond to it. So I thought maybe we should do a quick podcast about this article and what you found incorrect about it.
Well, like dozens and dozens of articles about my work, like this one, there is no way to contact the author. And secondly, there are so many errors, it's not worth many hours of my time to try to correct it.
Right. But what would be the top three that you would note here? You would agree that nothing lasts forever thanks to entropy. That's his opening remark here in the text, right?
Yes.
You agree with that?
Yes.
Everything that grows will eventually get old and die. You agree with that?
Yes.
Even our cells will eventually stop reproducing, ... And then he says, or will they? Can individual cells keep growing and replicating forever? It is only the larger organism that ages, or do we see old age taking effect down to the level of individual cells? And that's kind of the takeoff point where he's starting to get into what he says you answered Leonard Hayflick in 1961, resulting in a rule in biology that bears his name, the Hayflick limit. So what did he get wrong about describing the Hayflick limit?
Can individual cells keep growing and replicating forever? The answer is no. Is it only the larger organism that ages, or do we see old age taking effect down to the level of individual cells? Totally wrong. Smaller organisms age, mice, flies, and individual cells.
Right. Right.
He claims to know something about my work. If he does, he wouldn't make that statement.
Right. Right.
He says if you take a small sample tissue of elderly men, are the cells themselves elderly? Of course, those that are at the end of their lineage are elderly. but not all of the cells are at the ends of their potential lineage, which he doesn't understand.
Right.
Then he says, overcoming this limit may be a critical step in extending our lifespan if we want to suppress our natural age limits. Well, he's wrong about that. I never said that the limitation on cell replication is the cause of aging. At that time, very little was known about the biology of aging. It now turns out that senescent cells are being found in humans as we grow older. And he doesn't seem to understand that at this point in the article. Then he limits the culture to vertebrate cells, which is wrong. The claim was supported by Alexis Carrel, yes.
Is he right that
they hadn't been growing for 34 years. They were replicating for 34 years. The individual cells stayed at the same size. This is a common error by amateur scientists like this guy, who doesn't know the difference between growth and replication.
Right.
I never said a word, not a single word about growth.
But did he get right that you challenged what Carrel had to say? I mean, that seems to be the heart of what he...
Of course I did, and I proved it. I proved that Carrel was dead wrong. He fed the so-called immortal chick heart cells with nutrients periodically that were prepared by him by macerating chick embryo cells and then centrifuging the mixture, which was tantamount to swinging a bucket around his head a few times. And then he took the supernatant, that is the fluid part, so he thought, from the centrifugate and used it to feed his allegedly immortal chick heart culture. What he didn't understand was that he had been taking up in the pipette containing the nutrient fluid fresh chick embryo cells every time he fed his so-called immortal cells. So he was seeding them with new cells twice a week.
Right. So that's like a basic error, right? The basic scientific error.
And there's several proofs of that. I met a major character in this field at the Decennial Review Conference of Tissue Culture Association in the mid-60s. He was a Canadian who took a sabbatical in Alexis Carrel's lab and wanted to see this immortal culture that had become such a popular item in the press at that time.
Right.
And he learned from Carrel that Carrel's technicians prepared this nutrient fluid freshly twice a week to feed the culture. And Ray Parker, the man I met, said to me, he told Carrel that he could save a lot of time on the work of his technicians if they made a large batch of this embryo mixture and froze it and then thawed it when the so-called immortal culture should be fed. Carrel said, no, you have to prepare the fluid freshly or the nutrient aspects will be lost.
Right.
And Parker persuaded him finally to try it after a lot of resistance. And Carrel said, okay, we'll try it. So after feeding the immortal culture for a couple of weeks with frozen and then thawed nutrient material, the immortal population showed signs of dying.
Right.
Carrel said, see, I told you so.
Yeah.
The nutrient fluid loses its potency on freezing. He did not know that what happened was that he killed the living cells and the nutrient fluid that was reseeding the alleged immortal population.
Right. That's quite a story that probably is not in any of the history, or is it in the history of this this science?
It is in the history, not only in my article, but more importantly, in two long articles in a journal called The History of Science. The author is a good friend of mine, Jan Witkowski, who has just retired from being the head of the Communications Center at Cold Spring Harbor. His boss was Jim Watson.
Right.
And Witkowski has two articles in the journal, The History of Science, showing that not only did Carrel allegedly not know that he was refeeding the culture with live cells, but he actually knew it, and that it was a scandal.
Yeah. Wow. That's really corrupt science. I think in this article, you just think it's not thorough enough. What this gentleman did, ideally, he would have turned this draft article over to you and said, did I get this right, Dr. Hayflick? And you would have said,
They won't. I try to have people do that, and then I spend 4 hours correcting their errors, send the corrections to them, and I never hear from them again.
ouch. Did they get right this idea that there's about 72 replications? Because I've never heard the number 72.
Neither have I.
I mean, where's that number come from? That like had me scratching my
You
head.
have to ask him if he'll ever allow you to communicate. I do not know.
Right. So when you look at articles like this, is it just sort of racy stuff that you say to yourself, this is getting people excited about some future approach where everyone wants to believe that they can live to 150 or some crazy number of years, right?
Yes, that's been going on since recorded human history.
Right.
This guy has one motive. He wants to sell the article to the magazine. You can't sell an article to a magazine that says we're not going to live forever.
Right.
Editors are too stupid to want anything else but an article that tells you how to live forever. I've written a long article for a book. The title is Why Biogerontologists Should Never Write Popular Articles About Aging. The reason in my article for not doing that is that your paper will never be published because no editor wants to publish a paper that tells you you're going to die.
Right. Yeah, it's got to have a certain racy element, and it is published on this thing called Medium, which is sort of a paid subscription. He gets paid for the number of people that view it.
You can't contact him. That should give you a loud and strong message. He doesn't want to be contacted. He wants you to believe this crap.
It must drive you crazy, though, when you see this stuff, because I know you see a lot of it.
I've lived with this for 60 years. It doesn't bother me anymore. It's the nature of how to lie and get away with it.
Well, or how to use puffery and what might be called exciting news, because he is working for a tech startup, which I'm sure is trying to figure out something that might create a longer lifespan or a longer health span, right?
Of course.
I mean, to me, that's like a big part of what you can imagine is sort of the way in which science is proceeding in America. If it isn't financeable and it's not exciting to imagine some drug or some therapy, people are disinterested in, and they want to believe that they can be youthful forever and that they're not.
Well, do you know that's the literati that says, if you want a book to be successful, you need to incorporate the 3 leading items that make a book a bestseller. And so you need to title your book Lincoln's Doctor's Dog.
Yeah, that's good.
Now you have the 3 reasons why bestsellers are what they are.
Yeah.
The book should be called Lincoln's Doctor's Dog.
Yeah. But I thought this was an interesting side topic that.
Well, we haven't, of course, we don't need to, but we haven't covered the dozens of other errors in our article.
Well, it sounds like it would be too painful to do it, but I do think that popular writing often glosses over science because science has a lot of details and a lot of nuance and a lot of explanation and a lot of details that most individuals never want to touch, right? They just don't want to go there.
People do not understand that scientific writing is only a progress report.
Right. Hey, thanks, Len. Thanks for spending the time this afternoon. You look great. I was a little worried about you when I couldn't reach you yesterday, but you're looking great.
Well, the time wasn't right. Good to see you also. Regards to Lee.
Good.
And, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.